Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I'm Chris, and today we are installing a custom steering shaft. Why, you might ask? Well, it might have something to do with the fact that I cut most of the front off this truck and now have a rack and pinion. So if you're interested in learning, this job, unlike all my other videos, isn't OBS specific. You can do this on pretty much anything you need to put a custom steering shaft in for whatever reason. It doesn't require welding unless you need a support, but there are other options for that as well. So follow along. Let me know down in the comments what you want to see next. And thanks for watching. Alright, so the first step in doing your custom steering shaft is decide if you're going to weld or through bolt your U-joints. I prefer through bolt just because if you're not careful, and especially on this one where it's, let me take this out, scratching the paint, 3/4 chromoly, if you're not careful, you can actually heat it up too much and make it brittle. And the last thing you want is your steering shaft to break while you're going real fast. So we're going to drill through. You can see I did one just to make sure I didn't make an idiot of myself. And I'll show you how we do that next. Alright, so this is the longest and most time-consuming part. But depending on which U-joints you get for your steering shaft, they won't be drilled. Some of them have a set screw, mainly for the part where it goes into your steering gear. Or in my case, a Ford Pinto rack, which is, I don't know, 9/16 or 30, whatever, something. Alright, so like I said, the first steps to drill your U-joints, depending on your kit, the brand, whatever, they could be different. These are meant for 3/4 chromoly, and I don't want to weld these to the tube. Just for safety, I'm going to do bolt through. We are going to be using a 5/16 Allen, and the idea is, why won't you focus? What a piece of crap. So this is the idea, right? And we're going to go right through the center. It's very important you make sure you buy the correct bolt. That way the shoulder goes through the U-joint and through the chromoly and back out. This bolt's slightly long, but that doesn't really matter, just as long as the shoulder passes all the way through. Now if you're doing like the D-shaft style, I think it's called, where it has two flat sides, you can get the U-joints with the set screw in them. Some of them have them on both sides or at a 90 from each other. And then you can just drill slightly into the D shaft and put like a dimple in it. But like I said, for our case with 3/4 chromoly, we're just going to drill a hole. Now an easy way to figure out where your hole needs to be is you can take a scrap piece like I have here and slide it on. And then if you mark the edge right here, you can measure it out and split it in half. I already know it slides in about 1 inch. So what we're going to do is take our old Harbor Freight calipers we don't care about, and we're just going to set it at 1/2 inch. Now when you got it set it up on the ridge and just scribe all the way around. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you want it pretty close, because if this line isn't real close, the bolt's going to want to try and go through sideways, and you're gonna have more issues than you want. Alright, so we got a clear scribe line around there. We are going to take a punch and just pick a spot. So I'm gonna punch it real quick. Don't poke a hole in your hand. Alright, so I've got a spot punched, and then for the other side I just take the caliper around, see the punch there, squeeze it, and then I kind of just, I don't know if you're going to be able to see that. Right there, there's a little bit of a wear mark, and that just gives me a real close estimate of an exact, a cross measurement essentially of where the other hole was. Because like I said, if you drill this out and the holes aren't almost perfectly across, your bolt's not going to fit through, because we're going to be using a 5/16 drill bit with a 5/16 bolt, which means it's going to be a really tight fit. So just take care, take your time. I'm sure there's better ways to do this. This is just the fastest way for me, because like I've said in other videos, I'm impatient. So I'm going to mark the rest of these out and we'll get to drilling. Alright, so the easiest step, or not easiest step, what am I trying to say here? The easiest way to drill these, I would say, is to put it in a vise, unless you have a real nice drill press jig or something fancy that I don't got. Chuck it up in your vise. Now these things are thick. They're thick, boys. So I highly recommend starting off with a pilot bit, wherever it is. This guy right there, roughly an 1/8 inch. I'm going to go through the front side, flip it over, do the back, then do this side, and then I'm going to do the last U-joint we have, and then we'll go up to the big size. Don't do that. Break the frickin' drill bit off in there. That's unfortunate. Let's see here. You know what they say, slow and steady wins the race, unless you're racing. Alright, now you can use incrementally larger bits to get up to 5/16, or you can just do your pilot and go up to 5/16. Doesn't matter. I'm just gonna go right to it. I'm sure it's gonna take forever, but whatever. Come on, meow. Alright. So I've got one 5/16 hole, and you can kind of see the other pilot hole there. So all I'm going to do is stick this bit right back through, line it up with that pilot, and drill through the backside. Alright. There's one done. And the reason I didn't flip it to drill it through that pilot hole is because if you already drill through the one that's 5/16, and then you line it up with that inner pilot, it basically ensures that your bolt's going to fit, because you're forcing it to go through. So you got your 5/16 bolt, then you got your 5/16 bit. If you drill from this side and drill from this side and your measurements were slightly off, there's a chance the bolt would go in there a little crooked and it's not going to fit. So if you do your pilots on both sides, drill this one out, and then drill through it like this through the pilot, your bolt's going to fit through there, even if it's slightly off center. We got 4 more holes to drill, and then we'll get the test fitting. It's worth mentioning too, if you're doing this, the reason we through bolted them is because if you weld this guy, you weld your U-joints to your chromoly tubes or D-shaft or whatever, how are you going to get it out? I mean, in this case, I could loosen, where is it? In this truck specifically, I could slide that guy on, or I'd have to have it assembled, welded together. Then I'd have to loosen the rack, loosen the set screw, slide the rack out, and you're still not getting the shaft off because you would have welded it to your tube up here. I mean, you could just through bolt the top, I guess, weld the rest, and then leave this guy. Like I said, I think this is a better option. And if you guys are curious, let's see. These little 5/16 bolts have like 115 to 130,000 psi of tensile strength, which is going to shatter those U-joints or that chromoly tube in the case of a failure. What I'm trying to say is these bolts aren't going to break. They're going to fuck up everything else first. Don't buy grade 5 hardware for your steering stuff. So, we already have one set in there. We are using a Motion Raceworks steering column, but we are not using their OBS kit because there's not many OBS parts left on this truck. So I had to, they send it with like 2 inches of overhang coming out of here, and I trimmed it, pushed it back up because I have this bar here for my coilovers, which we did in the last video. I should also mention that when you're doing all this stuff, you need to make sure you are using shouldered bolts. I mean, it's a little long, but you can always cut it, I suppose. Shouldered bolts, because as your suspension's moving, your truck's rattling, car, whatever, if there's threaded parts going into your tabs or into your shocks, it's gonna oval it out. We got new bolts for the lower control arms, and if you're wondering, you just got to take measurements of what you need, go on the old McMaster car, and they'll get them to you quick. I literally put in an order for these bolts, the Allen bolts, the new control arm bolts yesterday at like 8:30 at night, and I received them the next day at 2:30, which is ridiculous. Anyway, so the next step is to start figuring out, ooh, yuck. Start figuring out where you want your stuff to go. So I just have a spare tube from, I don't know, something. But it's gonna help for mock-up because I can slide it in there and start gauging angles. I am using a TRZ kit. Everything in the front end steering wise is TRZ. TRZ outer tie rods, TRZ rack and pinion, and then the TRZ steering shaft kit. They send you like, I don't know, 3 feet 3/4 chromoly, 2 to 3 U-joints, depending on your setup and what you need. And yeah, I really like all the TRZ stuff so far. So, oh, and it also came, if you go with 3 U-joints, it comes with this little support. Now, the only thing I don't really like, not TRZ-wise, but steering column-wise, I don't know if there's a way to change it really, but I think they use Delrin bushings, So right here, and then let's see if I can show you behind the steering wheel, and then the chromoly steering shaft goes through it. But what happens is there's a slight amount of play, not much, just a little, enough to bother me. But at the end of the day, when you're driving, you're probably not going to notice it. So anyway, enough blabbering. Let's keep this moving. So because we're using 3 U-joints, we're going to need a support. And this is the basic idea. Alright, so this is the basic idea, right? We got our one already bolted into the steering shaft of the steering column. And we're just using this little short piece to help with mock-up. Our little support guy is going to go on the floor like everything else does. I'm actually going to weld it probably near this old coil spring pocket. The reason I'm using this short tube for mock-up is because these U-joints, I think, have, it's like a recommended max of 30 degrees of angle or something. So if you start mocking stuff up with a short bar that fits in here, you can kind of test what your limits are, feel where it's going to get notchy. Also gives you an idea of length. So what I'm going for here, there's too much crap here to get a good view, but this is going to go somewhere down here. I'll probably cut it down. Actually, I'll probably just cut an angle in it so I can weld it flat to this pocket here. Then we're going to bolt another U-joint right there and meet up at this lower, at the rack. This job's really pretty simple, especially if you don't have all this extra crap in the way. And if you have a normal OBS, Motion just sells the rack and they sell a steering shaft kit, so you don't have to do all this. But this is also for people with just hot rods, whatever, that they're doing custom steering in, rack and pinion swap. They want to lighten things up and don't have the ability to get a solid steering shaft. So this is actually the style I was talking about earlier that has the 2 flats on it. If you're going to be street driving a lot, I would just recommend doing this. It's not that much more weight, a couple pounds. But if you're like me and don't want to stop eating burgers, you have to start cutting weight out of your car. So I'm going to start getting this fit up and I'll catch you up in a minute. Alright, what the hell? So we got our support tacked on. And we verified, let me shove this guy back in there. Come on. We verified that this U-joint still operates smoothly. No problem. Now the next step is we need another U-joint, and we're probably just going to put it right on the back side of this guy. Right there. And then we'll have one more piece that goes, oh, for God's sakes. That goes right there. So yeah, let me cut some stuff up and we'll see what happens. Alright, I got that piece cut. And this is where we're at. So I haven't drilled anything yet. It's just slid in there. I'm sorry it's hard to see. There's just too much crap in the way. But essentially, we got a little bit of poke there, no big deal. It's going through our support up into our original U-joint. And all we have to do now is connect that U-joint down to the steering rack. It's worth mentioning, if you did a rack and pinion swap, you need to, it might be hard to see, I have marks on there, but you need to find the center of this guy. Because if you go through all this work, and your steering wheel is freaking upside down or something, you're not going to be able to adjust that out with the tie rods alone. So find the center of your rack. When you get to the point, I guess where I'm at now probably, you're going to want to make sure your steering wheel is where you want it. You know, usually up and down. By up and down, I mean not off to the side. I'll put a laser in there and go from that orange stripe down through the hub and the bottom. And then I'll probably, I don't know, wrap some tape around it so it doesn't move. But the next important part is a little tricky. So basically, you want to phase your U-joints. And what that means is, I'll see if I can line it up better. So this U-joint, the way I understand it, so you got a cap up here. You're going to want this lower one to also be the same direction. So cap up. Now, the way I think I'm gonna do this so it's perfect is I'm actually gonna take this bolt back out, slide this off, and then I'm gonna basically just take the two U-joints, this bar out of the truck, set it on the ground, align the U-joints, and then drill it. Then we can slap it in here, assemble it, and do our last bar. Sorry if this video is hard to follow. I'm not the best teacher, but hopefully if you haven't found a good video on this, this is good enough to get your project going. And it is also worth mentioning, don't cheap out or hack your steering up, because in my opinion, other than brakes, which are non-existent, steering is the other most important thing in your car, whether it's a race car, street car, whatever. If that breaks, you could kill someone or yourself. So like I said, don't half-ass it. Take your time. If you have questions, ask them. Use high quality parts. Amazon sells these U-joints. I suggest you do not buy them. These are, what brand are these? These are from TRZ. These things are nice. Oh, Sweet Manufacturing, I believe they are. Very nice, very heavy duty. They have your set screws so your caps can't fall out. The only failure I could ever see with these is that your U-joints are eventually going to get a little loose, which isn't a big deal, because if you built it bolt through like this, get a new U-joint, re-drill it, and you're good to go. So that was my PSA for the day. Let's get this bar off and I'll show you the next step. Alright, so I got my shaft in my hand, and basically this is correct phasing. The caps are identical on either side. So what I'm going to do is, this is the tube isn't drilled, but the U-joint's drilled. So now we can just take our 5/16 bit and drill right through this chromoly, and then drill through the other side, stick a bolt in it, and then once this one's drilled, we can work on aligning that one. Alright, so as you can see, I'm drilled all the way through on one side, not the other. This is when you would correct your U-joint phasing. This one is good to go. Quick tip, chromoly is an alloy steel if you're using chromoly, and it's very strong. So I suggest using a good drill bit. But when you get to the point where you're drilling through the chromoly, you can drill through one half of it and then stick your bolt through, and that'll kind of be a placeholder, and then you can flip it over and drill your other half. Or if you're confident enough, you don't do that and hope your holes aren't misaligned. But yeah, we got that one drilled. We're gonna stick a bolt in there, then we're gonna drill this one, double check your phasing. What happens if those are off kilter from each other is you're going to get a notchy steering feel because they're going to be fighting each other at different angles. So the shaft's going to be trying to get pulled back and forth between the U-joints. Whereas if they're aligned, it's going to be a nice, buttery, smooth operation, and you'll be good to go. So just take some extra time and do it right. And we're back after 20 minutes. Because what I failed to realize is when you drill out all these U-joints and tubes separately, the U-joints are married to that specific side of the tube and the specific orientation the U-joint faces. So, in my normal fashion, because I never take my time, I just yeeted all this stuff out of the truck, got it prepped, and realized none of my U-joints fit because all the holes are slightly different. And this tube, the way I drilled it, is slightly different. So each U-joint has to go in its specific spot, its specific orientation. So I suggest marking all this before you take it apart, unlike me, or else you're going to spend 20 minutes trying to figure out which direction it all goes. Now, once you've gotten this far, like I said, you might not need a third U-joint or the support. We have tested that the steering is still smooth, which right now only one U-joint's technically hooked up, the other one's floating. We have our one tube drilled and the bolts are just kind of chilling in there. The next step is very simple. On a Ford Pinto rack and pinion, it uses a spline. Half of this U-joint splined, the other half is smooth, just like the rest. So what I did is I set the depth of this U-joint just to where this guy wouldn't hit it. And that's where I'm going to set the depth. That's how we're going to measure. Now another thing I should note, I don't know if you can see it, but these U-joints have depth stops. So there's a ridge 1 inch in that's going to stop your tube. Make 100% sure every time that you're drilling a tube in a U-joint that it's completely at the depth stop at every joint. Because if it's not, you could have a hole, let's see. You could have a hole right up on the edge of your tube instead of a 1/2 inch down where it's supposed to be, and that's going to cause a weak spot. So again, take your time, don't half-ass it, and get shit done. So, all we're gonna do, find a rough estimate of the depth stop in this U-joint, find a rough estimate of the stop in this U-joint, gonna measure with the old tape measure, and we're gonna cut out another chunk of chromoly. Now this one is gonna suck, simply because ideally, you know, you'd want to mock all this up and try and drill it in the truck. But that's, well, I might be able to drill it from under actually. You see, when you take an OBS and you cut the ginormous cross member out, you have an insane amount of room under here. So I might actually be able to drill it from upside down. I'll cut this piece and catch back up with you. Alright, after some more screwing around, it is done. Everything lines up good. There's no binding. The only issue I ran into that I wasn't thinking about is because these are all solid shafts. There's no slip joint. There was no way to assemble this because all the tubes are perfectly bottomed out in this whole assembly. And there wasn't enough down adjustment here to get it all through. But luckily, on motion steering column, they have this collar here, and if you pop it off, you can actually slide the whole column forward. And that gave me just enough room to put this assembly back in, and it's pretty smooth. No binding. fairly tight. That is, I mean, there's a little slop just it being bolt through, but if you want to compare this to a factory OBS, this thing's a luxury hot rod right now. So yeah, that's it. If you have slightly longer bolts than you need, like this, they're going to rattle around unless you put washers in. Don't forget to Loctite all these, because like I said, steering's important. You don't want to hurt yourself or anybody else. But that's the gist of it. Thanks for watching. If you have any suggestions or comments, leave them in the comments. Thanks.